I gave the panelist questions, so I'm skipping to question number 5 for those keeping track and may have it ahead of time. Since we're talking about inclusion in our community, how welcoming are we to you into the community? What do you feel that Simsbury does a good job at welcoming into community, or what are we doing to welcome you into the community? Can you talk a little bit about that? Tell me about what it feels like for you. Welcomed, not welcomed. Yeah, I'd like to know about welcoming you into the community. Will?
So as I said before, I grew up in northern New Jersey, and the school system there was a lot different than how it is in Simsbury. Because with Simsbury, I feel like there is like a lot more accommodations and people being more flexible with people with disabilities. And I feel like if I were to stay in New Jersey, I probably wouldn't be as fortunate to achieve said accommodations. But not only but the community is just so welcoming with so many employment opportunities and people with such a friendly environment that people actually know you and not just see you as just a face. They actually get to know who you are and get to know you as a person.
Anyone else on thoughts on welcoming in the? Yes, Kate.
I was on sports team, so I was in plays a lot. I done the passion shows, and also done play bar theater, and also I done a Special Olympics, and also I worked at a Lucy Pizza. Also, I was a cheerleader.
Right, that's great. That's welcoming. And
I really couldn't.
Yeah. I think as a community, I worked in the school system for a little bit as a part-time paraprofessional, and it wasn't even a second thought that I had a disability, and I was working with with kids with disabilities, but I worked mostly with the upper elementary school age, and it was the kids I was not working with, the able-bodied group of kids. It was never a second thought. I didn't notice kids kind of treating me any differently than they treated any of the other paraprofessionals or the teachers or adults in the classroom situation. And I think that speaks well for our future, that it was never, a second thought. When I would help out with the younger kids, they were curious and they had questions, and I would answer their questions. And I think that is a good thing, to ask questions. And I think that was a very comforting thought going into the schools. My daughter went all the way through the schools, graduated last year. There as a parent, the schools were always very inclusive, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, here's an elevator key, the teachers are upstairs or whatever the situation was. So I think it speaks well for the future, and hopefully things will change and be more inclusive, and it won't even be a second thought or second glance if someone comes with a disability. There goes my clock. So.
Dana, do you have something to say? And then I'll get to Nick.
Sure, yeah, and I can definitely second what Ann said just from my time, working in the Simsbury school system. Something I will say that I have noticed in Simsbury is, and this is just my own personal opinion. So growing up, I never liked the word handicapped. I always felt it, there was just something negative about it. The sense that like, when you have a handicap, that means you have a barrier to success or you're not able to do something. And I never felt that about myself necessarily. And in the disability community, and once again, only speaking for myself, nobody else on the panel, but there are many people who do find the word handicap almost offensive at times. And I have noticed that in Simsbury, though there are some, when it comes to parking, there are some like reserved parking signs. There's a lot of still handicap parking signs. Specifically, like I was just the other day at the town hall, and there's literally 6 handicap parking signs right at the town hall, when this is like a 45 to 50-year-old sign that I feel like at some point could maybe be, if we're a progressive town and a forward-thinking town, I think we're at the point where we could change that, whether it's just to reserved parking or, there's a couple of different versions now, but just the word handicap does have a negative connotation to a lot of people in the disability community. So I think that is maybe one thing that could be potentially looked at, in the future for our town.
I agree. And I'm going to get to Nick, but, I know we've often used terms like accessible parking, accessible spots. And Cheryl can attest to this. And one of the things we work on in the Aging and Disability Commission is for lack of a better word, because that's what they're still called here in town, the handicapped awareness. And, it goes with feeling welcomed in town, I think. When I cringe when I go to the schools or to shopping plazas and people who do not have the accessible parking plaque or permit are parking there, and they're just running in to the store for a second, or it's raining and my kid has to get in with a cello. And they don't realize that those are not convenient spots. They are reserved for those that need them. And my son Carter has a permit. I don't have a permit. It's in my car because I drive him, but I don't use it. If it goes with him into Dad's car, there's been times where we have absolutely, for the safety of his person, needed to use that tag, because the disability tag, because it was necessary. Otherwise, he was in great danger in a parking lot. And I've come out of schools and people are just sitting in there waiting for their kids to come out. And it's something that I find all communities need to work on, because that's not very welcoming to those that then need it and becomes a safety issue in town. I'm going to get to you, Carol, in a second, but I know Nick had something to say.
So I think that you will like this, Diane, based on what you just said. My husband, when he was in law school, he had a friend who was in a wheelchair, and he had a van that had all the controls on the wheel. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and he was pulling into the law library, and there was this girl walking out of her car, and he pulled his van in really tight to her car, and she said, "What are you doing?" And he pointed to the handicap sign, and she said, "It's Sunday." And he said, "I don't walk on Sunday."
Thank you. Nick, you had thoughts on welcoming to the community. And then I know Cheryl had her hand up and Robin had her hand up.
I've never been denied to do things when given the opportunity here in Simsbury, whether it's being on SCTV or being the manager of the Simsbury High football team or doing stuff like that. But I also agree with Dana, because the parking sign did change back in 2017, and I think Favor helped change that sign, and time to get rid of them in Simsbury and replace them with the new ones. So let's tell John Hampton to do that in his next term.
Thank you, Nick. I know. So Cheryl, did you have something to say?
I was just wondering if our panelists with physical challenges might comment on the accessibility of our buildings, our public spaces, and all of our, Simsbury prides itself on a lot of its outdoor spaces and recreational areas. And I'm just curious if you feel fully welcomed into those spaces also.
Please, Ann.
I think I use a wheelchair, and I think I'm the only one on the panelists that uses a wheelchair 100% of the time. And I think some of it is I grew up in New England, and New England is a lot older than most of the rest of the country. And I think sometimes, not just Simsbury, but New England in general, kind of falls back on they get an ADA exemption of things because it's historical, and that just really gets to me. But I think what I noticed here after I lived in the Midwest for 10 years in my late teens and through most of my 20s. And I noticed there when I wanted to go somewhere, I just kind of picked up and went there and didn't think twice about whether I could get in or not, because I could get in. Here, there are times where I was like, wait a minute, or I have to think about if friends invite me somewhere, well, I can't get in there. And having to call ahead when nobody else has to call ahead, they can just show up. That can get frustrating. You know, restaurants, it's like, yes, you can get in. Oh, but you can't get in the bathroom.
Right.
You're serving, you know, drinks and keep offering me refills and I can't get into the bathroom. This isn't a good situation. And I think some of these fixes, you know, they say, you know, again, ADA exemption because the building is old or whatever the case may be, but some of these fixes are very easy and don't need, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars to fix them. And that still shouldn't be a barrier to fixing them. And some of it is because it is older, but it can be very frustrating finding out when you're there that you can't get in or someone's got to help you when I'm a very capable adult and can do things on my own. So.
Thank you for sharing that. Getting to Robin, anybody else with that question? Okay. Robin, I know you had your hand up. Would like to share?
Yeah, my name is Robin Batchelder. I have lived here since I was 18 months old. I was not diagnosed with autism until I was about 37. And I just wanted to say, and I don't mean to put sad notes on anything, but I'm very happy that our community has become more welcoming because, not to age myself, but 25 years ago, that was not the case at all. I got treated like I was a monster. I would go into Simsbury school systems and get treated like a monster. I would get bullied. I would get beaten up. I remember going home and crying to my mom, who's also here. She's on the panel. Mm-hmm. I remember going home and crying to my mom, asking me, why am I not normal? Why am I not normal? And it got so bad to the point that my mom and dad had to send me away to private school at the Riverview School in East Sandwich, Massachusetts. So I'm very happy that the community has come a long way, but unfortunately it has not always been that way, and it was not that was not the case for me.
Right. Well, and we thank you for sharing your story. One of the goals of why we have these discussions and our mission is to have these honest discussions, to hear, it's not always about patting ourselves on the back. It's about listening to the true stories, and we're going to get into some of the struggles and difficulties that we do want to hear about, because I'm asking about welcoming because we want to know if where the struggles are so that we can address them and become better and do our job as a community. I'm glad that we're doing better, but I don't want to sit on our laurels and say, all right, our job is done. We need to keep moving forward and make it welcoming for everybody. So thank you for sharing that story, Robin. I appreciate that. Ann.
Yes, I have a quick comment. Cheryl asked how the outdoor spaces and things like that as far as accessibility. We're a very active family and we do a lot of things outside, and that has been wonderful. I mean, all the bike paths around, and it's just pure coincidence that the accessible playground at Iron Horse went in right as I was pregnant. And so it was perfect. You know, my daughter grew up on that playground, and the fact that I could take her to the playground on my own when she was a baby and get everywhere. And if she had an issue anywhere on the playground, I could get to her and help her as needed. And so, you know, I think that's been a great asset to this town. And so I think the outdoor facilities have been wonderful for me personally. As far as accessibility goes, I've been able to get everywhere and do everything active that we enjoy doing as a family.
Judy, did you have your hand up and wanted to make a comment or question? You're muted still. Let's get you unmuted. There we go.
There we go. There we go. I want to agree with Ann in a lot of ways. I'm also wheelchair bound and have lived here for 5 years. And there are definitely spaces in town that Well, I wrote in the chat that the van accessible spots, people don't know what those lines mean, and people don't pay any attention to them.
Correct.
And I've had arguments with people at stores when I can't get in my van because I can't open the door and stuff like that. And I tried to explain what those lines are for and why those lines are there. And I have a big sign on my car that says don't park within 8 feet of me, and drivers don't seem to see the sign.
Yeah.
So those spots, I feel like they just need some sort of, like, there's an additional sign that says, van entrance, or, or something that can be used and can be put in those spaces, especially that one at Fitzgerald's that everybody.
Yes, and that's particularly a one that we know consistently is an issue. Again, on the Aging and Disability Commission, we are aware of that and have tried to address that. And I do think, I'll be honest, as a town, we need to do a better job of understanding what those spaces mean for the vans, the other accessible spaces, and why they are provided. And, that's, again, being part of a better community, being part of a more welcoming community for everyone, is understanding why those are there, what they're for, and really do a better job. We really do. We need to do a better job with that all around. Cheryl.
I'm wondering if maybe Stan knows of anything on the state level
Right.
that might help us on sort of an educating the public theme, or on maybe new rules or regulations that might help those people who need better access.
I would have to check, but I think, from my volunteer municipal experience, part of this is education and some necessary enforcement, and that, while the law may emanate from the state and then be adopted as local ordinances, it really is that education and that follow-up that really makes the difference. It's, are there, what's the signage that a business uses in order to encourage people, that the parking for, and it may be as easy as some designated spots for families with small kids that are closer in, so that the accessible parking isn't used for that kind of purpose. But it's really the local outreach, and it's one of those things where this is the kind of thing where advocacy, education, and trying to appeal to people's better side can be more effective than the other direction of going, and helps build an understanding about why that space is needed, because that ramp needs to extend, the lift needs to extend for somebody to be able to get out of their vehicle or get back into their vehicle. That, I think, really has the lasting impact. And some of that may be, quick snippets on YouTube of how something works. There may be people who don't understand how something works or what the particular need is, and how a little bit of accommodation, parking 2 spaces over, can make such a difference for somebody in terms of feeling included, feeling accepted, feeling part of the community, being perceived as a person like any other.
I agree with you, Stan, and I think that's a really important point. I actually have a personal experience with utilizing that strategy myself when somebody was questioning what was the need for, and why was I not happy at the elementary school, particularly, that people were using those spots. And, can I be understanding for why they need to just run in? And when I broke it down and explained that it's actually about the safety of my child, and it could be a life or death situation for him and others like him that I had with me at the time, he had a shift and didn't realize that it's it was really truly safety issue and caring about somebody else. And, you know, I like that switch, not just trying to pound it into them. I like the understanding and kindness really goes a long way. And having somebody understand. And that's our point here is the panelists as well as the audience members, for us to understand. I know my understanding as a parent, but I don't live in your shoes and I don't have your experience. And it's important for us to hear from you in your genuine experience. Dana, did you had a comment?
Yeah, just one more thing to add.
Yes.
As like Ann was saying about, you know, some of the buildings and, you know, and Simsbury is I think starting to do a good job, but if there just was a little bit more uniformity, because Ann was talking about Iron Horse Boulevard, which I absolutely love. I love that playground so much, and their parking spots are actually, they don't even have a name. It's just like a wheelchair, you know, one of the kind of a more sporty wheelchair. But my kids also love going to Simsbury Farms and that playground, which unfortunately the majority of the ground there is all wood chips. And I hate to break it to people, but wheelchairs and wood chips just don't mix very well, you know? And so somebody in a wheelchair shouldn't have to choose between, well, I guess I have to go to Iron Horse Boulevard with my kids, when they should be able to go to any of the playgrounds in Simsbury, because that's what inclusion means. It doesn't mean,
Yes.
well, you can only go to that one. It should mean you can go to everyone. You're welcome to everyone.
Yes, you're right. And the same issue at the PAC, if you try to get through the gravel or the wood chips there to get to the lawn, and it is something we have recognized. And I know there is some stuff trying to be worked on for that, but you're absolutely right. Inclusion is not, we've given you this area over here to go to, and that's where you're relegated to. So thank you. That's a really important point. Thank you. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody on this welcoming. We've kind of started to dabble into the other question. And those, I know the video, I'm going to backtrack for 1 second. I know the video stopped briefly. So for those that missed the first question we talked about inclusion and what it means to the panelists. Then we moved on to how welcoming are we as a community for those with disabilities. So we've dabbled into this a little bit. So I'd like to ask now pointedly, what are some of the struggles that you find having a disability and living in a town like Simsbury? We've talked about some accessibility issues. We've talked about, you know, playground. What else do you find could be a struggle for you living in a town like Simsbury that you've encountered or experienced? Nick.
Transportation, but not much. I feel pretty much included.
Yeah, so you think, I agree, transportation is an issue, is a large issue for many people in the disability community here in Simsbury. We don't have a good transportation system for you know, and systems that are in place. Simsbury is not in some of these disability rideshare services. We are not a town included in those services. It's something that I have looked into and we are going to continue to look into, but it has been brought to the Aging and Disability Commission many times, the transportation issue, whether it's social transportation to get around town to social events or movies or restaurants. Job transportation is an issue. That's really, really important. And it really then isolates and you're not open to having that inclusion experience. Who else has? Ann. And then Kate.
And I think I just saw Judy might have put this question up there, the sidewalk situation. Some of the sidewalks are not so great in town. And I personally am one who am outside kind of regardless of weather. I like the winter. I don't mind a little bit of snow, but I cannot move in the center of Simsbury when it's snowing because the sidewalks and the curb cuts are not cleared, or they're cleared to a very skinny. Now my wheelchair is not too wide, but mine is probably one of the smallest chairs out there. So getting through in the winter is not, it's not going to happen. I mean, I cannot get from, say, Fitzgerald's to, trying to think of something a little farther down the road. I can't do it because the sidewalk may be cleared, but once I get to a curb cut, it's now skinnier, or the plow from the road has come by and piled it all on top. So that's something that every community has an issue with. Honestly, it's not unique to Simsbury. It's every community has an issue with that.
but we should be aware, and we should do a better job of that. And we shouldn't just sit back and say, well, that's what happens. Because I noticed, and I've made several calls, especially this last winter, was many times I would go to parking lots and noticed that the snowplows have now taken the snow removal.
I know where you're going with this.
The entire pile in the accessible spot.
Absolutely.
So now nobody can park in their accessible spot. And there were 3 specific phone calls that I made last winter directly to businesses and one to town hall to have that rectified, because
absolutely
that's an issue that we have. Kate, you had something you wanted to say.
Yes. Which types of snuggles? So we're going. I've been on my list game places. I get places because I don't drive. And mostly because I'm Friday and apartment in town, or maybe a town where I can walk to a grocery store and restaurants, because I can't drive.
You can't drive, and it's hard to get around. So you have 2 things that you may struggle with: is your transportation and getting around, but also where you live. So where you live in your home now, you can't get to, but there may not be a place in town for you to live that you can walk to places to socialize and to get your groceries.
Exactly.
So that, that's another thing that we need to maybe have some housing and more available accessible housing for physical disabilities, for those with developmental disabilities, to be welcoming and having the availability to work and to live in town and to get places. Robin.
I just wanted to say, just more social opportunities, because some people with disabilities, the thought of them entering a large crowd is very overwhelming to them and almost paralyzing to them. I know Nick, and I know Kate, and I know Will. I do theater with Kate, but Kate and I have to go to a different town in order to do that.
Right.
I do Special Olympics with Nick, but I have to go to another town to find the sports that I want to do for Special Olympics. So even if there is not a support group, because I don't like that name, but even if there is just an activity for people in a small group setting, because as I said, sometimes it can get overwhelming to people. Yeah. To some people with mental health issues and anxiety, to have to go to a big group, because I'm not able to do the activities in Simsbury because there's just too many people.
And you're right. I think, and some businesses are willing to work and have programs available, and then others, aren't. I know for myself, my son was doing a gymnastics program, but we had to drive him to Waterbury every Saturday because that's where the program for somebody with autism could go. We have facilities closer to us, but the program that was welcoming and specific for people with autism, even though they're an Olympic training facility, was in Waterbury. And it would be great, if you're right, if we had, so we have some things in surrounding towns that are a little closer, but it would be, it's great when you have things that are local, especially when you have transportation and accessible limitations. So that's a great point as well. Dana or Ann, do you have any? Dana.
Sure, yeah. So this might be an issue in all towns, to be honest with you. I don't know, but I particularly have a little bit of a problem with like food shopping, my grocery shopping. And I love the people at Stop and Shop. They're amazing. And I used to never even have a difficulty when I could wear a prosthesis, but around 3 years ago, I had to stop wearing a prosthesis, so I'm on crutches full time now. And they do have the shopping carts there that are motorized, because I can't push a shopping cart anymore. And the problem with the motorized carts there are they're very small, the baskets. So I've been a stay-at-home dad for the past 3 years. So I would sometimes have to go and take like 2 or 3 trips with just that one little shopping cart just to get my family's food for the week. And I actually had a couple of occasions where the cart that I was using broke down and the battery died in mid shopping. So I'd have to push it like all the way myself, like to the front. And so I don't know, and maybe this is just a logistical thing, I don't know, but to be able to, you know, just have a better way for somebody with a physical disability like myself to be able to shop on their own and go into the store. Now, with the advent of COVID, I've actually discovered the online pickup shopping, which I do love, but I still haven't had quite one experience yet where I haven't had to return food, or there hasn't been a little bit of a mess, you know, which it happens, whatever, you know, I'm not complaining whatsoever, but, you know, sometimes I would love to just go in and feel comfortable using one of those carts and not have to be scared that maybe it's going to break down on me. Then I have to hop to the front, you know, and it's just, maybe it's just a small thing, you know, that I'm complaining about, but it's, you know, if it's happened to me, it might be happening to other people. So I guess that's why I'm speaking up about it.
Will, do you have anything to share on any struggles that you've experienced living in Simsbury? That's great. That's okay. That's okay. That's fantastic. You know what? Since you bring it up, I'm actually going to move on to our next question, because this is a perfect segue. Unless somebody, and we can go back to struggles more as things come up, but how is this time right now affecting your life, your job, your social life with COVID and social distancing and mask wearing? You know, we have physical distancings that we have to do, and now one-way traffic in certain areas that may affect those with physical disabilities. We have social distancing and limitations of opening things, which are definitely affecting those with developmental disabilities who have limitations and often, as Robin pointed out, a hard enough time or just not the availability for socialization. This has all really affected a lot of people in many ways. And Stan, I'd love to hear from you as well on what you're hearing on your side, but I really am interested in hearing on how is this time affecting you. Dana talked a little bit about it, but share more on how this is really affecting those with disabilities and you personally at this time. Anybody feels free to jump right in. I know things were closed for a while. Ann?
Well, some of it, I mean, I realized, oh, I'm out of shampoo, and one click of a button and I have it the next morning for my shower. So that's and, you know,
true.
But,
maybe it's better.
One thing is I work in adapted sports, and I work with a lot of junior athletes with wheelchair basketball and wheelchair track and field and tennis and camps. And obviously that's all been shut down. And these kids, you know, they're kids from all over the state and all over New England, actually, because there aren't, you know, to get enough kids, we get kids from all over the area. And so that's been tough on the kids. We did a virtual camp this summer, which was good, but you know, it's still not the same as being there. Right. And we're working now on a program to restart and what we're allowed to do and what is safe to do and who can come to the programs and things like that. So that was the biggest change, I think, for me, because it's difficult. I'm a very active person, and we were outside pretty much every day during this time in our driveway playing games. We're fortunate to be able to have the space to do that. Got a basketball hoop in the yard. You know, I can continue to play basketball. Did hundreds of miles on my hand cycle with my daughter. So we were able to continue that. But a lot of the kids I work with were not able to continue that because they don't have the equipment. They borrow the equipment from our programs. And they may not have the facilities to be able to be outside or transportation to get to where they need to go on, you know, when it's not a program that's structured. So that's been the biggest change. And I think we try to keep in contact with these kids and just kind of, whether it's through social media, just to see how you do it. Right. They've been isolated along with so much of the population at this point. So.
Right. Absolutely. Nick, and then Dana. Nick?
The biggest part for me when at the beginning was losing my routine through at the beginning of COVID, and pretty much in not having a job and wearing masks are cool and but hard sometimes, but you got to accept it. It's because they're necessary to staying healthy.
Right. But, you know, you're right. When your job was suddenly shut down, that must have been scary. Like, will I go back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cate, I know that Dana had his hand up, and then I'll get to you, Cate.
To piggyback a little bit off of what Ann was saying, I started playing wheelchair basketball a little over a year and a half ago, with the Connecticut Spoke Benders, which are based out of the hospital special care, which I know Ann is a big part of. And I can personally say that many of the gentlemen that I work with and I play with on the Spoke Benders are really suffering in a way, because wheelchair basketball for a lot of these guys, was their main source of not only physical activity, but also like it was a great socialization for them as well, and to be able to feel a part of something, really means a lot to somebody who, could be isolated in a wheelchair or have another, type of disability. And now they have nothing, no way to connect with anybody. So, I can personally say that a bunch of my friends have really had a difficult time with this. I'm fortunate because I'm still able to get out and, go into nature or, take walks or that type of thing. But, for a lot of my friends, that's not an option necessarily.
Right.
And then maybe probably, along with a lot of other people, as I've been a stay-at-home dad the past several years, and, especially this past spring and, going to this fall has been very difficult because I do have 3 kids, and my oldest daughter, who's 13, really wants to be in school, but she also has some other health issues, and we're just not in a position where we can take any type of a chance with her, and that's hard, because I don't know if we're making the right decision some of the time, but and it's difficult doing the distance learning thing, and so that part is definitely, which I'm sure, whether you're somebody with a disability or not, a lot of people are going through some of the same things. Right. So I definitely empathize and feel with everybody who's going through that.
Thank you. Cate.
My how's my life goes so far during COVID. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go to dance, and my play got canceled. So we told next year. As we came back until the end of January. I was a bridesmaid. Will and Nick Cate Alex, my friend of ours, she got married, right? She had her first wedding, and she did have her reception yet, her shower yet at all. It must be her wedding must be got postponed a bit of times.
Right. When is she going to have a reception later, Cate?
Okay, I forgot the plan for her shower.
Okay, but we don't need to go into that yet.
No.
Yeah. But that must have been hard for you to see your good friend who you were going to be a bridesmaid, and how hard was it? You want to be there for her, but she got married in a small little thing right now, waiting for something later, but that must have been really hard for you.
Yes. She had her first wedding done, and then until next year, she's having her shower and her reception.
Yeah, and
nice. That's great. Yeah. Will.
So I'd say it was during the early stages of COVID where things were kind of thrown out of loop, because job opportunities were limited. I couldn't see my friends as much as I'd like to. But as, we're progressing towards getting out of this, more stuff is being open. I actually was going to have an in-person graduation in May, but for Gardner Webb, but that got moved to August 1st. But then that also got moved to October 23rd, which is going to be around homecoming. But then ultimately, since North Carolina isn't very good with cases at the moment, we're going to be having our very first virtual graduation on October 23rd, I believe. And there's a lot of other stuff I've been wanting to do, a lot of events. And for my job at the Big Y, you know, required to wear masks, which is kind of a shame, but like Nick said, they're essential because I like to smile. I like to greet people with a positive attitude. But right at the moment, it's just not a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And I know it's hard missing these life events like graduations, and that's, you know, but good for you. You seem to have a good attitude about it. Stan, what are you seeing? You know, what are you feeling, and what are you experiencing with clients and people, and you know, advocacy policy work with COVID and all of this for disabilities?
Much of the same, but some, as some of the panelists have mentioned, but for some of the people that we support who have significant intellectual or developmental disabilities, their ability to understand why everything is totally different from what it was it can be very limited. And while they may have familiar supporters with them, the whole routine has been upended. For many, it meant no family contact for an extended period. And we did at Oak Hill, we did things where every place where we were supporting people got an iPad for FaceTime and FaceTime with families. And we had a program manager start a concert series, online virtual concert series that everybody can access. So, you know, some good uses of the technology have made a difference. As things have opened up, some places have hugging apparatus so that family members can have that kind of contact, and the whole protocol to do that. It's been incredibly difficult, not just on the people that we're supporting, but their families. We have two camp programs, one that we operate at Camp Harkness, which is a state facility, but we operate a camp program there. And for the first time in something like 60 years, we didn't have summer camp. Yeah. And I know of one person who spends 6 months of the year waiting to go to camp, and then the next 6 months talking about all the things that happened at camp, and then going through that. And it's that kind of an experience, and all of that went away. We operate Camp Hemlocks in the Empston section of Hebron as part of our Easter Seals program, and it's for folks with physical limitations. But they all get together as friends, and because of common interests, and all of that went away, and be able to use the outdoor facilities and a swimming pool and bring in the local community at the same time to have that synergy among people. That all went away, and it's only slowly starting to come back. So for a number of the folks that I know, the impact has been incredibly significant.
And I've heard a lot of that, you know. I couldn't imagine if Carter was not living with us, you know, for those who have children with disabilities who are a little bit more impacted, and you know, are so used to being there 24/7 and relying on you. And if I suddenly, even if he was in a home, you know, there's still that parent contact so often, and so many were just completely shut off, and it was devastating for both parties. And, you know, I know for Carter doesn't necessarily quite get what COVID is, and what would really happen, but he just knows he has to wear a mask, and he has accepted the rule, and moves on and washes his hands all the time. But, you know, there's that understanding piece that I think is missing for some people, and it's hard. It's very hard. My heart breaks for everybody missing out on family events and stuff, but it's when you're not understanding why you can't see your family is really hard to process. Cheryl, you had some comments, and then I see Nkosi. Cheryl, you had something?
I'm just trying to unmute. I was just going to follow up on what you were saying, Diana. For those of us who are parents of somebody with a profound intellectual disability, you know, we couldn't see him for 6 months, and we just got to see him for the first time recently, and
that makes me cry.
Terrible. I mean, it's terrible for him, and it's terrible for us. But there are so many other challenges that came along with that because he's very sensory defensive, and a lot of people with his types of disabilities are sensory defensive, and to try to get a mask exemption from the state is nearly impossible. And what we found was, you know, he had to go to a dentist, and the dentist refused to see him because he didn't have a mask on. And even though we had a piece of paper that said, you know, he can't wear a mask, they said, too bad, you know, we're sorry. He ended up, you know, we had to go to St. Francis Hospital, you know, so he could have somebody look at his teeth. And even there was a lot of resistance. We had, you know, calling ahead from his providers, from the house nurse, and everybody else. So I think it would be great if people out in the business world and out in particularly medical providers had a little more understanding of what it takes for some of our folks to put a mask on. And while we have done things like had gotten a shield, or, I mean, but he can't even wear a hat, you know, he's never worn a hat. He can't wear gloves, he can't do any of that. So a lot of people don't understand that concept. Right. And, you know, an iPad is great, but he looks at the iPad like it's a TV. He doesn't understand why that's us on the TV. I'm
not laughing at you, but
yeah, I know. And it's just, that's the way it is. And, you know, the provider tried to say that, you know, we could come and look from a distance. Well, that doesn't work either. If he sees us, he thinks he's going with us. You know, there's no middle ground there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are other parents on this program now that have experienced that type of feeling, and it's difficult.
Yeah. And Kosi, you had a question or comment. Oh, you're muted still. Oh, go back to unmute again.
Okay. I had a question for Will, because I don't know if I missed, but I heard you saying that you were supposed to have a graduation in North Carolina. So I was just wanted to know, like, what school is it and what is it that you're studying?
So I actually graduated from Gardner-Webb University. It is in North Carolina, about 45 minutes to an hour west of Charlotte. It's very close to the North Carolina-South Carolina border. And I graduated with my degree in broadcasting.
Nice. All right.
Yes.
Awesome.
There are possibilities.
Yeah.
So talking more about COVID and social struggles and mask struggles, and you know, I know we'll speak for, and some people, Nick, I know, talked about job closing, and Will missed graduation. You know, technology is great and has saved us all. We're all on a Zoom right now, and that's great, but it's not the way we always did things. And as Cheryl talked about, sometimes those technology is even difficult for those with disabilities, because especially a developmental disability, you know, it took a while for, I know, my own son to understand these Google Meets, and one-on-one was fine, but as soon as it got to be groups, it was very overwhelming for him. And, you know, he's still in a transition program, and I purposely did not have people on the panel who were not graduated and living an adult life. But imagine what school is like now for those with disabilities, now having to be home. And your individualized program cannot be individualized at this point, because through, you know, it's all being done at home or through technology. And, you know, his part of, as Nick went through and Cate went through the Farmington Valley Transition Academy, and anybody else who may have, the whole purpose of it is job training and life skills training. And that's not something that he could do sitting on a Google Meet from our dining room. You know, he basically lost 7 months of his programming. And unfortunately, we don't get that back. And that is devastating for parents, because he needs that time. So I know from my perspective, there's a lot of things we've lost in COVID. Yeah, my typical daughter also lost her high school graduation. You know, Ann's daughter did as well. But the tangible things that we're losing in socialization and education and life experiences for all of us, but those with disabilities, it can be more impactful. And what they're losing, that time and experience, is critical. It's critical timing. And Stan, I know you definitely have experienced this with your clients and, you know, families, but it's really a story that we're telling, and you know, we don't know the end yet. We don't know where this is going to wind up. Anybody else have any comments or questions, audience, before we move on? Dana. And then
as I had mentioned about my daughter who's 13 and you know, has autism, and the past year she's really matured so much and just come out of her shell. And I mean, if this had happened like 2-3 years ago, like she didn't want any type of friend, she didn't want to know anybody, she was totally cool just hanging out by herself. And this is the year that she wants to make friends. She's like really coming into her own, and she's like, I want to meet people. And I'm like, oh, it's like, it's heartbreaking because it's impossible to do that on a Zoom call where you do have a couple other kids, but you have other kids in the classroom, and it's like, you can't talk to them. You can't do, you know, so it's heartbreaking because you know, this is the year that she wants to do that, you know, and I can't give that to her right this second, you know, so that, you know, I feel for everybody who's going through that same thing.
Thank you. Nicole?
So I also have a middle school daughter with a trauma background who is hungry for socialization and at a stage where she's ready to do it appropriately and take the bumps and the get down, stand back up again of middle school. And so I think we're about to go back to school in a couple of weeks if COVID stays in check in the middle school, 4 days a week. So that will help. But my idea was, I've heard so many good ideas and things that we could address. And I know that, Will, you have a background in broadcasting. And I know that, Nick, you said you are involved with SCTV. I was kind of just thinking, I don't know how we exactly make it happen, but I wonder if there's something there, like a little series of segments on Simsbury through our lens, or let's make Simsbury better, or just, I don't know, I'm just going to plant that seed. Maybe we can circle back after the session's over and just see if there isn't just something we could make happen there, because you're all here and it seems like it's possible.
Nicole, you always have such a great big perspective. I think that is fabulous. And if that comes from this Let's Talk, Simsbury Let's Talk, I would say that is unbelievably great. And I think it can happen. It totally can happen.
I think it's great. That's fantastic. We have talents here. Let's utilize them, you know, and that's one of the things, we're going to get to some more questions, but, you know, one of the things that I always like to plug, and I'm going to probably plug this again at the end, and hopefully will be our takeaway message, is focus on abilities. You know, we talk about disabilities, but what are the abilities? And focus on our strengths. And I know, so I always use this example. I'm going to go out for a job, right? I cannot sew to save my life. Okay. So I'm not going to go apply to a job to be a seamstress somewhere. That would be futile. We shouldn't have to force people with disabilities into jobs that they're not good at either, just because it's a job. But when I'm creating my resume, I'm not putting down all the things I'm terrible at. I'm putting down all the things I'm good at. All the things I've done well on my job, the jobs I've got, the strengths, you know, the computer skills that I have. And that's what I present to my prospective employer. And that's what we need to look at when we talk about people with disabilities of all levels is, let's not focus. Yes, of course they need supports and there needs, but what are the things that they can do? Also, what are their strengths? And that's, we focus on, you know, we highlight their strengths and support the weaknesses. That's where we can be productive in our communities. That's where we can be employable in our communities. That's where we can be welcoming and accepted in our communities when we present the right resume for that person. So with that, why don't we talk about maybe what some of your goals are, and things that you'd like people to know about you, whether, you know, within your disability, and what you would like, you know, people to know, and where you'd like to see things move forward. Kate.
I want people to know about me. One is I am very famous person ever on earth. Everybody keeps up saying that. It's so sweet. I'm kind and loving. I am a hard worker.
Yes, you are.
I am confident.
Yes, that is true.
I love having a job. I love to be I love to be independent.
And your goals.
And my goals were I need to keep working out in Mr. Hope. Statistics of the producer keeps up saying I'm mad every time it's late about getting married to my boyfriend in Israel.
Okay, yeah.
And then the last one was I find my own apartment.
You find your own apartment. Nice, Cate. I think you missed a goal.
No, not.
You want your goal. You want to be famous.
I read them all.
You did read them all, but you didn't put down that you want to be famous.
Oh yes, she will. I'm famous.
There you go. Thank you, Cate. Nick.
My goal is to live my life to the fullest every day and have fun.
Yes, yes.
Nice.
Is there something you'd like people to know about you?
In a couple at the end of October, I'm moving to Bearwood's apartment and right up the street from Favor up in Canton, and it's a apartment, and it's gonna be, and I have a roommate, and it's gonna be an adventure.
Nick, that is so exciting! Congratulations!
Thank you very much.
You better invite me. Me and Carter can come over to say hi.
Oh yeah, cocktails at my apartment. Only water though. This is actually.
All right. That's awesome, Nick. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Who else? Will.
So one of my main goals is to use my broadcasting degree and go into the radio business as a DJ. Not so much for going to weddings or school dances or stuff like that. Like actually working a radio station, talking in the microphone, playing music for everybody. It's something I've grown a huge passion for. I've actually done it back at Landmark in Vermont, and I guess you could say that's where I got my passion for it. But I grew even more of a love for it while at Gardner Webb. And I guess I could also say my mentor or professor got me into classic rock quite a bit. I had a whole show dedicated completely to classic rock. And I kind of want to do something like that wherever I go.
That's fantastic. See, no limits. Ann.
I think I'm a little bit older than many of the panelists here, so a lot of my goals, I've accomplished a lot in my life. Academically, I have several degrees, and athletically, I've been able to travel the world, which has been wonderful. But I think some of it is, for the last 18 years, I've been kind of part-time working and stay as a stay-at-home mom. And I think a lot of times when, you talk about how you kind of want to be remembered or, things like that. And, there's times where people will say, and I'm sure all the panelists here have heard it, oh, how inspirational you are. Mm. And depending on how that is used, it's not necessarily a compliment.
Right.
It can be used as a compliment if someone has heard my story and and it's inspirational that way. But I've heard, I've gotten it when I'm at the grocery store, getting a gallon of milk. It's inspirational. I don't want to be inspirational just doing what everyone else is doing. I mean, you know, it's kind of, so I think, kind of like, and I'm sure everyone else on the panel can hear it. I don't, it's fine for me, someone to call me inspirational if it's done for the right reason, versus just I'm doing what everybody else does. It's just the common everyday occurrence. And, Nicole, if I see you in the store buying a gallon of milk, I'm not saying, ooh, how inspirational.
Right.
But I see you out there, I don't know, on a kayak doing some amazing tricks. I'm like, whoa, that's incredible. I'd like to be able to, figure out how to do that. And that's inspirational. But, so I think sometimes if you living with a disability, you're not given credit or not. It's like you can do more than just get out of bed.
Right.
And, it's like, and I know Dana's experienced it as an elite athlete, and so I think some kind of a goal of mine, and I'm trying to get better at it. When someone asks a question, even if it's the 100th time someone's asked me that question, it's the first time they're asking me the question. So trying to be a little more patient and like, oh, here we go again. But trying to be a little better about answering them in a way that they can become educated. And because many times I am, I, no pun intended, but I stand out in a crowd, yet I'm the only one not saying anything. But it's kind of like, it's kind of like when little kids have no filter.
Right.
And, little kids will ask you anything and everything. And, an example is when my daughter was little, preschool, we were on the playground and I heard a kid say, "What's wrong with your mom?" And I could see the look on her face. I go, "No, what's wrong with mom?" She turns around and sees me and she's like, "Oh, nothing." And they're like,
right.
And the little kid, it was no big deal. I mean, but she's all concerned about, oh, what happened to mom? And she looks at me, it's like, nothing's wrong with mom. I mean, and it's like, and I don't know who the little kid was. It was probably someone she graduated high school with. I don't know. It was just a little kid when she was, 3-4 years old on the playground. So I think sometimes as adults, we lose that. You can't necessarily get away with saying things like that. But I think it's important to, be curious and not judgmental. And that's not for me. That was what I think Walt Whitman said it. And I think my goal now is to kind of educate people who are curious, and don't treat it as them being judgmental. They just want to know, right. Even though I've heard it 1,000 times, they haven't heard the answer ever. So.
And I know, Judy, you had your hand up and I want to hear from the other panelists, but you touch on something that is also an interesting point, and a fine balance I think we as a society and community need to be careful of is we want to honor those special moments that you have, understand who you are and treat you with respect and dignity as a person, but not constantly looking for that, part of my language, inspiration porn that often happens in the disability community, where it's only highlight because somebody with autism shot a bunch of basketballs, there are other things that they do as well. And, you have things because you're seeking out to do those amazing things that you're doing, and that should be honored. You trained hard as an individual and as a person because it's your passion. But that is such a great important point that you bring up, Ann. And so thank you for that. Judy, I know you had your hand up. I saw Robin, and then I have some other panelists. Go ahead, Judy.
I did, thank you. Along the same thing that Ann is saying, it's adults. I mean, it's the adults that need the education. It's the adults that look at me and say, "Oh, trade you what? My 2 legs, my 2 useless legs for your 2 good legs?" Like, it's just, and the kids don't necessarily come across that way. I mean, yes, if a kid jokes with me about wanting my wheelchair, I can say, well, you give me your 2 legs and I'll give you my wheelchair. But I think that a lot of it is just awareness and bringing that, just as Ann was saying, being more open and saying, yep, this is the 15th time I've heard somebody want my wheelchair, but really you don't. You don't. I also live in a building with 40 other people who have MS, and it's really hard because it affects every single one of us differently. And so I would just say that, you know, one of my goals is to get more involved in Simsbury and get more involved in what would help, you know, the 48 of us that live here, and what would, you know, help Simsbury in terms of acknowledging and that type of thing.
That's great. Thank you. You know, you bring up a good point now. I forgot what I was going to say. So I'm going to move on to another panelist and hopefully it'll come back to me. Dana.
Sure. Yeah, I loved everything that everyone said, and love what Ann said about the disability part. And I can definitely relate to that. So I think for me, I actually, probably not at the time, but subconsciously really did not like the fact that I had a disability, which is why I think I went to the extremes to show people that I didn't have a disability. And that was through sports. And so I was either as good or better than most of my able-bodied peers. And that's how I dealt with the fact that I had a disability. But the fact was that once the sports kind of were over, you know, after the 2000 Paralympics, like I didn't have a whole lot to turn to after that, you know. And the reality is people with a disability suffer from mental health issues significantly more than some, you know, able-bodied people or somebody who doesn't have a disability. And that's something that I can definitely attest to. You know, my 20s and 30s were extremely difficult dealing with mental health issues because of the fact that I wouldn't accept the fact that I had a disability and just couldn't accept that, you know. And it was about 3 years ago where I talked about where I used to have a prosthesis. I wore a prosthesis my entire life. And about 3 years ago, I discovered that my hip was deteriorating at a very rapid rate, so I could no longer wear my prosthesis. And that was extremely difficult because it was like almost going through a disability all over again for me, because, you know, I had just started becoming a stay-at-home dad, and, you know, I no longer could carry my own baby who was just born. You know, there's, like I said, the whole shopping thing. I couldn't just go to the grocery store and have my baby, plus try to push the shopping cart, you know. So there was like a lot of stuff that I was like, you know, it's like I went into this depression all over again, you know, and it was very difficult. And I had to ask for help, you know, I had to get help. And so a couple things happened. I really realized that it was okay to ask for help and to get the help that you need for, you know, whatever issues you're going through. But the
Uh-oh. Dana, you got frozen. Uh-oh.
We need to hear B.
I know. He was at such a good point too. Hopefully he comes back to us.
I have Dana's number. I can give him a call. Just let him know.
Okay, because we're like at the edge of the.
There he is.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, we were all like bated breath anticipating what's happening. It's
That's
like
the end of it.
movie went out. Like, I am your father. Then what happened?
So the deal was that the bigger thing that I think happened to me was that I really learned to accept my disability, because it forced me to examine the fact that, you know, because I kind of went into this depression after not being able to use my prosthesis, that I had never really dealt a whole lot with the fact that I had a disability. So, and what I came to the realization was that I had spent the majority of my life running from my disability, but it was in fact my disability that was allowing me to have the greatest impact on the world. That's what was allowing me to help people. So it was around that time that I really decided to going from that's the something you didn't know about me to now the goals thing. You know, I decided that I really wanted to dedicate my life to helping people with disabilities. And it was around that time that me and my very good friend, Michael Norton, started a company called True Adaptive, where we are trying to build assistive technology as well as adaptive equipment for people with disabilities. And the goal is to not only impact the disability community with our products, but also impact it on a much bigger scale. For example, hiring people with disabilities, you know, being able to give back a lot of the funds that we make to programs to help people directly that impact people with disabilities. So that's one of the goals that I've been trying to work on for the past couple of years. And then one of the other goals that I really have, and and it's been really since COVID hit that this idea really came to me, because I saw how fickle it could be if you had a job and just lose it out of nowhere. So I wanted to do something for my family that would be very helpful. And now that I'm kind of coming to the end of my stay-at-home fatherdom, you know, I needed something that I could really kind of sink my teeth into. So I really want to go into motivational speaking. And it's something that I did a little bit back in 2001 when I was a Paralympian. But to be quite honest with you, I didn't have the life experiences and the message to be able to give back to people like I do now. So I really want to go back into schools. I have the background as a school counselor. I really want to go into schools and just give a message of being able to overcome adversity, and also educate people on, you know, the disability community as well. So those are kind of the two main goals that I'm really focused on over the next several years.
That is fantastic. And you and I should talk. Like, there's a bunch of people I need to talk to after this. That's fantastic. Really great. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for really sharing your truth and being honest about that. Like that, I think is impactful when people hear that, you know. I did remember Judy's point was, you know, and what Ann also said is, you know, I find that sometimes people say things because they don't know what else to say. And it's like their discomfort comes and then they say something and they like kind of laugh. And I think a goal should be, you know, as one of my goals, at least for the community, is to, part of that acceptance is understanding we're all human beings, and that dignity and respect piece needs to go a long way in all of our work, whether it's marginalized communities, you know, race, religion, disability. But that acceptance, you know, when people say things and they think they're funny, but it's not really funny, and getting that discomfort level kind of to ease a bit will go a long way into that acceptance and welcoming into that community. You know, I used to watch parents on the playground, look at Carter and say, you know, no, he was like 3 years old or 4 years old. And the little kid would come up to try to play with them. And they'd finally ask, you know, oh, and I'm like, oh, he has autism. And slowly the parents would take their kids to the other side of the playground. And, you know, that doesn't feel very good. Or asked when he's in 3rd grade if he's a savant because he was able to recite Cat in the Hat, you know, over and over again. And is he going to go to college? When in 2nd grade, I was asked that. I'm like, I don't know. Do you know that your 2nd grader's going to college? Like, you know, it's hilarious. Stan, I would love to hear from you about, you may not have personal goals for your, you know, but goals that you would like to see for the community, and what you would like people to know about what's needed for the disability community and goals for the disability community. Yeah, I'd love to hear from your standpoint in the advocacy and policy work that needs to be done.
I think we heard that this evening. People's stories need to be told. Policymakers need to hear it. I know one of the things we hear, whether we're talking to folks who are at state government or in Congress, is, and that's whether it's the members or their staff, is they want to hear people's stories, because that's how people relate to an issue. That's how people see what's important. That's how people come up with agreements and solutions, and progress gets made. To hear the stories like we heard tonight, the stories of what the challenges are, the stories of hope and inspiration and successes. That's the best kind of advocacy, and it's getting those messages out to people who otherwise might not hear them, and might have some preconceived notions, and this is the way to change those preconceived notions and to have people be more included, and drive what happens in their own lives.
Absolutely. I think he has jumped off, but I see you, Robin. But I do want to recognize that on that note, I think he has dropped off the call because he may have had something else to do. But I did appreciate that Eric Wellman was part of our call this evening, our first selectman here in Simsbury. And he's been on every single one of our calls, by the way, I believe. But it's people like that need to hear. And I saw him as certain topics were brought up. I saw his wheels. I saw him making notes, like I was not aware of that, making notes as we were doing things. And you're right. Those are the people who all have the ability to affect change, but then get it to the people who are making the change, who are making those policies, who are creating the laws, who are in the positions of power to affect the change that we want to see made. Robin, you had something to say.
I just wanted to say that that I look sometimes as my disability is the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I work at the Farmington Polo Club in the bakery, and I would have never met any of those people if it wasn't for Michael Basuto in Dream Ride. I don't know, we can get into what Dream Ride is another time, but it's to say it nicely, paraphrase it, it's a celebration for people with disabilities and for people in Special Olympics. I know Nick goes. I'm not sure if Kate goes, but I know Nick goes. And my disability has blessed me that I was the recipient of the 2021 Dream Out Australia trip. So I'm going to Australia. Only 10 people in the entire country get to go to Australia. But I look at, and I've been the keynote speaker at the Farmington Polo Club twice now. And sorry, Nick, but I am the mayor of the Polo Club. You can't have my title. But you can have Simsbury. It's much bigger, bud. I don't like crowds.
Thanks.
But I look at my disability, and I hope my mom does too, is, you know, I've had my mental health issues like Dana has. I've tried to take my own life just because I never really thought that I fit in anywhere that I go. But I still think my disability is the best thing that's happened to me. I've met great people like Kate in theater, and Nick and Nick's mom, and Will goes to my church. Yep. And so that's just what I just wanted to put a positive spin on it, that, you know, I feel blessed to have autism, and I feel blessed that I have it, and I can still live on my own, and that I still can have my driver's license and live a fairly good life, which is great.
Right. That's awesome. Bravo. Thank you. Dana.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, that was great what you just shared. And I think that's the biggest thing that really hit me, was that not only, I mean, yes, some of the things that I do, yes, do they inspire people? Yes, they do. You know, that just kind of goes along with the territory. But like Ann said, I don't want to just be, you know, being clapped for, you know, as I'm walking down the grocery store aisle. You know, I think the bigger thing that what my disability allowed me to do is really have a very deep sense of empathy for people, specifically people in the disability community. Because even though I might not know what it's like specifically to be in Ann's shoes or Kate's shoes or, you know, Nick's shoes, like there is a common struggle that people with disabilities, as well as the families of people who have somebody with disabilities, whether physical or intellectual disability, all share. You know, with my daughter, you know, having autism, I mean, there was a 4 to 5 year period where it was like a war, like every day. And it was like, it was hard. It was really hard. And, you know, so to have that common bond, to have that common struggle that you've gone through, allows you to kind of have that sense of empathy. And, you know, which is why I know, at least for me personally, is why I really want to help people, specifically in the disability community. So what you guys are doing here has just been absolutely amazing. And, you know, I'm very proud and honored to be, you know, part of this panel.
Thank you. Thank you. I have found this to be fantastic. I've appreciated hearing everybody's stories, people's truths. We do want to know struggles, because that's part of the story. And it can't always be, you know, the sunshine and the roses and pat ourselves on the back about how great we're doing, as I said before. I want to make sure there's nobody else that has anything to say, because I want to make sure we hear from everybody. But this has been really great. And, you know, I think as a community, I would love to hear from you, not only in my work on the Spirit committee, but as I mentioned, on the Aging and Disability Commission as well. We are working, and if there are things, I hope you take my contact information. I want to hear, and I do think the leaders of our town want to hear. We want to make this a better place for everybody, for literally everybody. You know, and I think some of the work we've done has unfortunately been put on hold because of COVID, and I've been planning disability events quarterly now for the past several years, and we couldn't have our spring event, we couldn't have our summer event. We usually have a Halloween event, and I cannot figure out a way to do it because we can't be in person, and it's breaking my heart. So hopefully we'll do our Halloween event somehow. Working on it. But anyway, I agree with you that coming together and having that common bond of the disability community is something special, just like other communities have their bonds, and it's something that we instantly have something we relate to, and have that empathy and have that common bond that whatever the disability is, you know, I was not born with a disability. This is something that was brought into my life, and I know what I know from that, and I've just, you know, embraced, and I'm so lucky. I do feel blessed that this has been such an important part of my life and has directed my life in so many ways, that I've met so many people, and really looking forward to learning more, growing more, and doing more for this community with the help of all of you. And all of your stories tonight have really motivated us, I think, to do more and to do better. And I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate the audience being here. So I'd like to thank Dana and Nick and Will and Cate and Ann and Sobi for being our panelists tonight for this wonderful, wonderful presentation. Really eye-opening, really just heartwarming, and really ready to hit the, you know, boots to the ground work done again. So thank you all for participating. Do not forget that in the comment section, in the chat section, we have put up the survey. If you would please take a few minutes to just fill that out and let us know what you thought about tonight, as well as some other topics that we have coming up. We do have our monthly presentations. We actually have sort of have 2 a month for the next couple of months. So look forward to our spirit calendar that's going to come out with more presentations to come. And thank you all for joining us. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. Yes, Robin.
Diane, could you please email the survey to me, because it's much easier for me to do it?
Sure. We'll make sure we get your email address.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
We'll be seeing you soon, I'm sure.
Cole, stay.
Okay.
We have Carol, we have Nkosi, Cheryl, Nicole. We can stop recording now too.